So, I came into the main hall several minutes ago and saw right there on the floor a group of people. One was maybe doing yoga. A number of them were apparently having a deep conversation. Another one was weeping. Another one was comforting the person who was weeping. Another conversation entirely was going on in the kitchen. And people were lying down, some people were walking around, some people were sitting there. The guitar was playing beautifully. And I just ask you, is there anything better? Is there anything better than that? I don't know of anything better than that, at least in the world. Best thing in the world. So do you think that's the best thing in the world? It's an important question. Because our lives demonstrate what we think of as the most important thing in the world, what we're living for, what we spend our days doing. That's what we consider to be the most important, the best thing in the world. Actions speak louder than words. I very much like that phrase, don't tell me your values, show me your budget. So you can say what you believe, but we're much more interested in what you spend your resources on. That's how we'll know what you actually believe. And your most important resource is your time. So what do you really spend your time doing? Do you spend your time weeping on the floor or having a deep conversation right next to somebody who's weeping on the floor? Do you spend your time playing a guitar next to the person, having a deep conversation next to the person weeping on the floor? Or do you do something else? There are lots of other things to do, right? Lots of other things you could be doing with your time than that. I'm not going to list those things right now. It's a long list, and I have the sense that you may already be familiar with many of those things. You may have stopped doing some of those things in order to come and weep on the floor, or to comfort the person who's weeping on the floor. I'd suggest that it's very important to ask, could there be anything in the world better than that? Is that how we change the world? Is that what we're trying to bring to the world? I bring this up because in terms of Buddhism, if we consider Buddhism, the Buddha said often that friendship, good friendship, true friendship, real friendship, is the entirety of this spiritual life. Now, just because you're weeping on the floor, just because you're comforting somebody weeping on the floor, just because you're having a conversation near the person who's comforting the person who's weeping on the floor, just because you're playing a guitar next to the person who's having a conversation next to the person who's comforting the person who's weeping on the floor next to the person who's weeping on the floor, just because you're doing any of those things doesn't mean that you're a true friend, of course. But all of those are compatible with being a true friend. And so I ask you to ask yourselves, is there anything more important than being a true friend? Anything in the world? Here we are. We are, believe it or not, about halfway through this. About halfway through this awakened leadership immersion, intensive boot camp. And we're starting now to make the shift from working with our internal experience to bringing our awareness out into the world. How will we live our lives? And a number of years ago, I had the chance to teach a little bit in a senior seminar at St. Michael's College. And the very first class that I was at, I asked everyone, what's the most important thing to you? In your whole life, what's the most important thing? And I made the list on the board, what people said was the most important thing to them. So some people were quite, how shall we say, honest. Said, making a good living, money. Other people said fun, want to have fun. Some people said learning. But it was a group of over 20 people, and the most common answer, the most significant trend in that group, which just over half of the people named as the most important thing in their lives was friendship. Their friends were the most important thing to them in their whole lives. And so this semester passed, and the very last class that I was at said, okay, well, we're pretty much at the end of this year. You're all seniors, you're graduating in a few weeks. I'm interested in what you're now doing. You're going to do something in a few weeks. You're going to do something. Well, what is it? What are you doing? And so then I went up to the board and made that list also. So then, with that list there, I then went back to the notes I'd taken. I wrote down the initial list, things that were most important to people, according to them. And I asked them, how many of you put your friends as your number one priority in making this decision of what you will now do with your life? One person raised her hand. One person. Other things, making money, that was definitely the most common reason that people had made that decision, by far. There were some others, taking care of certain people. There were other reasons, but friendship was not a significant part of that decision. Could you turn on those rather than those? And so it's very important that we ask ourselves this question right now in the midst of this intensive. What is the most important thing? And then that we use our integrity in actually living our lives according to that. Actually living our lives according to that. The Buddha didn't just say friendship, friendship, friendship. He told us what friends do, what friendship actually is. And they're basically, and it's a significant list, but I'll bring out two things that are worth emphasizing because it's often different from what we think of as friends. One of them, I think, is very well understood. A true friend is someone who doesn't leave you when things are hard. But the other one is not so well understood. That is that a good friend doesn't agree with you when you're doing something wrong. If you're doing something wrong and someone agrees with you and supports you in that, they're not a friend of yours. They're your enemy. So these 2 points, a person who will not agree with us and who will not leave us, that is a way of considering what a true friend is. Too often, we make our friends according to our beliefs, according to our ideas of what's good and what's bad. And when people don't agree with us, then we want them to go away, or we want to go away from them. They see things this way, we see things that way. And we try to create friendship based on that. This is a kind of friendship that it seems that the internet is very good at creating. You can find people who see things your way, and then you can live in a little bubble of views without noticing that it's a tangle, a thicket of views. But we need friends for our own benefit, for our own happiness. We need friends in order to allow us to move forward in our lives. We need friends in order to awaken. And we need friends in order to become leaders. Because now we are turning our attention towards this question of leadership. This morning at the breakfast, during the breakfast conversation, the main thing we discussed is what is leadership? What is that? What is leadership anyway? And one of the people said that the way that she had typically thought of leadership is basically that you get into a war and die young. So you're a leader if you are in a war and then die quickly. Which I thought was actually quite brilliant, to put our conception of leadership that bluntly. We've had people come here and say, so I hear that you're making awakened leaders, but I don't really see that happening. And so then we ask, well, what is a leader to you? Say, well, you could be a political leader, for example, or you could be a business leader. And then we already heard about the military leader. So that's what a leader is. A leader is someone who... What, again? What is it that we're referring to again? What exactly is leadership? I have the sense that in order to understand the basic way of looking at leadership that most of us carry around, it may be helpful to look at the Chaturvarna system, which is professed by classical Hinduism, or at least Brahmanism. And so, in this way of looking at it, there are these 4 castes, 4 types of people in a society. And they each perhaps have their own kind of leadership, although the 4th, the Shudras, aren't typically thought of as leaders at all. So they're the workers. And communism was an interesting idea about how the workers might gain power, but it's extremely uncommon that the workers have power or leadership in the world, at least in the normal way that we think about leadership. The other 3 groups do, however. So there are let's start with the Kshatriyas. In Buddhism, Kshatriyas come first. So my pronunciation of that isn't very good, but the warriors, the government, the state. And so we think of political leaders. We think of, well, if someone is a political leader, well, then they're a leader. That makes sense to us. And we would like politicians who are awakened, because politicians are leaders, and you want to awaken leaders. It all makes a lot of sense to us because, yes, there's a kind of leadership, there's a kind of power that comes from the aristocracy, the state, the government. And what kind of power is that? What kind of leadership is that? Well, to put it again very bluntly, because I appreciate this blunt sort of conversation, the state, the government, the warriors, are the people who have a monopoly on murder. This is a normal way to look at it in the study of what is a state. What are the significant stages as a state comes into being? Well, one of the most important things is that eventually there's a group of people in a society who has a monopoly on killing other people inside and outside of that society. They also have the ability to imprison people. So they have a kind of power over people's bodies, you could say, and then other sorts of power, or you could say leadership, come out of that. Okay, so very good. So now we know about the warrior caste, the government. What else is there? Well, there's also the Vaishyas, the merchants. What do? Well, it's their job to control the resources, to distribute resources in one way or another, and more or less in the way that we normally think of resources, it's their job to have money, their job to control the money, to own it, to spend it. That would include even things like banks, along with anything else, textiles or lumber or whatever it would be. So there's the economy or the market. That's a kind of power. And so we say, well, we want leaders, so maybe business leaders. And that just comes to mind automatically. For a long time, we've been thinking in these terms. It isn't just in India. So we have we have the state and we have the market. And so we might have political leaders or business leaders. These are kinds of leaders. And they're very significant kinds of leaders right now. But there is another type of leader in this system, and that leader is the priest, the Brahmin. And that person's job, their kind of leadership, which we might call the church. So you have the church, the state, the market. In our terminology, we might think of it that way. So what's the job of the priest or the church? Their job is the control of people's minds. And before I continue, I wonder, when you consider, I don't know if you were maintaining mindfulness or not. Maybe you were, though. So just in case you were at the moment, what was your emotional reaction when I said that the state controls your body, the market controls your resources, and the church controls your mind? Did any one of those have a particular bubbling up of body sensations? The church, the priests, the storytellers, have their own kind of power and maintain their own kind of leadership. And that leadership, like the others, can be just and it can be unjust. But this particular type is very special because all of these entities, the church, the state, the market, all of these entities are fictional, are stories, are ideas. They exist because people say they exist, and for no other reason. The United States doesn't just exist in its own right. The Catholic Church doesn't just exist in its own right. It exists because people say it exists. And it exists because people agree when someone else says it exists. I was talking with a friend who's an atheist, about God and the United States. And my claim was that God and the United States are equally fictional entities. And he said, no, God is actually not real, but the United States is real. I said, okay, but how? What quality does it have that makes it real? I said, well, it's obvious that it's real. I said, okay, what exactly makes that obvious? I said, well, come on. This is the argument. This is an intelligent person. This is the extent of his argument. I said, well, can you see God? He said, no, of course not. Can you see the United States? Well, you don't have to see something for it to be real. Ah, very good. But no, I mean, it has, like you can go to the White House. You can go there. I said, yeah, you can go there, and you can go to the church. I said, well, no, it's different. I said, okay, how? I said, well, it's obvious. Storytellers, the producers of the ideas that structure our perception, these people have enormous power. And their power is special, in particular, when it is not seen. It's different from the other two kinds. The state and the market want to be seen. It's important that they're seen. Consider the current election. Everybody wants your attention. They want your conscious attention. Look at the advertising for the things that you might buy. That's a huge industry in itself. The selling of people's attention. That's what advertising is. Actually, myself was a little bit of a businessman for a little while. And I made in high school, I made a phone book for my high school, and actually for some other high schools. It was a high school phone book. It was great. And so what did I do with that? Well, what I got by making this phone book of all the students in it, it's only the students, and it was done by first name, because a lot of times you don't know their last name, and so gave a little more information so you could know who someone was if you only knew their name, their first name. What I got out of that was that people would open it and give it their attention, and so I could sell their attention to advertisers, which I did, and made money with that. And I learned how to sell things. I learned how to make a pitch when I was in high school. I learned how to go to different businesses and tell them why it would benefit their business to give me money so that I could direct people's attention to their company. And they did that, and it was beneficial to their business. But in the case of the storytellers, that power is most, of course, sometimes you have to do it out in the open. You don't have a choice always. But ideally, the stories that people are living their lives according to not only are stories that they don't know that you told them, that you think are just real, but even better if they themselves tell them. This is the best. This kind of power, the ability to get people to agree to see the world according to stories, according to intersubjective fictions, this power is the one for our species that has allowed us to shift from societies based on friendship to societies based on other forms of cooperation. This is an extremely important point. For almost all human civilizations, and if you call it a civilization, I don't know what the definition of that word is, but almost all human societies throughout all of our history, almost all of them are based on friendship. And friendship here means that you actually know people. And through knowing them very personally, you decide if they're trustworthy. If they are, you cooperate with them. If they're not, you don't. The people who cooperate more are more powerful because cooperation is power. If you want to know what power is, I'll tell you right now. Cooperation is power. Collaboration is power. That is what power is. Power is the ability to cooperate. Power is the ability to collaborate. Power is the ability to work together. That is what power is. For most of human society, we chose to cooperate and how to cooperate based on very intimate personal relationships because we only knew several dozen people. We knew of more people, but we'd be in a band, in a tribe of several dozen, maybe a few hundred at most people. You would connect with other tribes and such. You might even know the language, but it was very difficult to make friends with them. Why? Well, because your tribe was in a state of constant war with every other tribe on Earth. Of course, you only had access to the ones right next door, but it was your tribe against all other tribes. And it was of the utmost importance that your tribe, like their tribes, could cooperate. And that cooperation needed to be very trustworthy. Because when you were out on the battlefield, or when you were giving birth while away from the rest of the group, unexpectedly, you needed people who would actually be there for you, who would really be there for you. And you didn't want to be with people who weren't going to really be there for you. We made a shift from that style of community, that style of society, to one in which most people we interact with, we don't know at all. You walk down the street and you pass lots of people who you don't know at all. You go into the store and buy something from someone who you don't know at all. And yet we trust these people. We trust them to not kill us. We trust them to not rob us. And we trust them because we're all serving the same master. And that master doesn't want us to fight with each other. It wants us to collaborate because our collaboration is its power. And if you consider these three kinds of power, the priests and the politicians, the warriors and the merchants, each of them has their power because they get you to cooperate in a certain way. They have a way to make you cooperate. And as they make you cooperate to their ends. And so the workers, this other group, is collaborated by these other quote leaders. And those leaders use that collaboration for their own ends. Doesn't mean that those ends are bad. We tend to distrust it enormously, but it isn't necessarily bad. But it's worth questioning, especially if it looks like we're getting collaborated toward the end of life on the planet. If there's this machine that's running, that's driving us to the extinction of life as we know it. And so then at this point, what is interesting to look at is, in particular, how have these three, it's just one way of looking at it, of course, but these three leadership styles, how have they come to cooperate? How are they cooperating with each other? If we look at the state and the market, it's clear how they are collaborating. The state, to a large extent, its job is to run the market and to be sure that the market is growing in power as much as possible every year. And if the economy isn't growing, at least you could say the GDP or whatever you'll measure isn't growing, then that is considered to be a failure of the state. The state is blamed for that. If it is growing, then the state is praised for that. Those in power stay in power because they're doing a good job to taking care of this market. And beyond that, the market, the economy grows, and in that way funds the initiatives of the state. A state without money doesn't... It's important to see this. If there is an administration, or even a government, without money, that ceases to exist. Money is absolutely required, and if a state doesn't have it, it's a failed state. It's of the utmost importance that money, the story of money, is more basic now, more fundamental, more important to us than the story of the United States or something like that. United States, so if you consider, just as one example, it seems as if Great Britain is a really significant thing. Just recently, it had an enormous empire spanning the globe. As they say, the sun never sets on the British Empire. That means that there was never a time when it overtook the entire globe and the sun was always shining on some part of the British Empire. It was a really significant force on the planet. But just a few decades ago, if the United States hadn't lent it a lot of money and given it a lot of resources, it would have just ceased to exist. And there wouldn't be one now. Because Germany would have just taken it over. It needed money in order to exist. Without money, it couldn't exist. And so we see the cooperation of these two styles of leadership. What kind of religion is it that is compatible with this state market entity? That's the kind that has been selected. That's the sort. As I say, the kind of church that is most powerful is the one that you don't think is a church, the one that you think is reality. Because as long as you think it's reality, you will cooperate with the market and the state and fall into its grasp and just collaborate along until you die. So please look closely at the stories that you tell about the world. Nowadays, the religions that we're taught are basically materialist humanism or humanist materialism. That is the thing if you go to seminary, if you go to get trained as a modern priest, that's called going to college. And if you go and go into the humanities, you will be taught humanism as we know it. If you go into science, you'll be taught materialism as we know it. And those together create the kind of religious view that allows us to collaborate and cooperate with the market and the state. And the three kinds of leadership coalesce into this one incredibly complex system. And therefore, we do not fulfill our vow. Your vow is the enemy of the state, the market, and the church. Because this vow isn't just a story. This vow is not fictional. This vow is, well, if you want a single word for it, it's friendship. Someone here, who I won't name, wrote something magnificent about what we're doing here. And if you want to do research, you can figure out who this is, but I don't know. If it's public, it's that person's fault. So I didn't know the one who made it public, just the one telling you about it today. So this person wrote something. We'll call this person. They wrote something about what we're doing here and said, as you do this, as you attempt to walk this path, eventually your entire mind tells you to stop. Everything in your mind says stop, stop, stop. Everything in your body says stop, stop, stop. Your entire body will say stop. Your entire mind will say stop. Don't keep on walking this path. For whatever reason, your mind will come up with lots of reasons. Your body will come up with lots of feelings. And so the question arises, what keeps us going at that moment? That is the thing that holds us together truly, in a way that can be trusted beyond stories. And that, if you want a word for it, is friendship. But know that now what friendship is becoming deeply mysterious. If we don't know this thing, if we don't know this thing that keeps us going when everything in our mind and everything in our body says stop, then our minds and our bodies will trick us. The church will trick us. The state will trick us. The market will trick us. And will give us not friendship, but will give us what I call the symptoms of friendship. Certain qualities of friendship. So if you go online, you can get things like friendship. It can feel kind of like friendship. The things that your brain is looking for friendship are kind of provided. The things that your body, mind want as a kind of experience of friendship are provided enough to get you to shut up and go and get on with things. And I bring this up because of the one thing that I say most often, and that is that it is urgent. The situation we're in is an urgent situation because you are already cooperating. There's anything that I have found infuriating through my life is that people keep on pretending as if the problem is going to happen someday, maybe. This is what I hear people say. We only have 5 years before global warming does something bad. No, we do not have 5 more years. We have negative 50 years. That's how long we have. 50 years ago, it was already tragic. There was already disaster. You have to look out because maybe someday there will be nuclear war. That is a completely backward way of looking at it, partially because there was already nuclear war. We already did that. And you can read the accounts. They exist of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can learn about it. It's really bad. And the likelihood that that will happen is not going down right now. We've almost had a nuclear war again and again. The most recent person that I know who didn't participate in one was Boris Yeltsin. Maybe some of you know this. Yes? Well, there was a little glitch, and everything said that they were being attacked by NATO. And he decided not to push the button, even though he had information that said he should. He personally saved the entire world. And that is not the only one. I'm just telling you one. I can go on. There are lots of these cases. It's amazing that it hasn't happened yet. And we are already cooperating with this system. I know it's tough, but the thing I'm trying to point you towards is you can't think, well, I'll deal with it tomorrow, or I'll wait until things are more clear, or something like that, because if you're not moving forward, if you're not breaking free of this, you are part of it. You can't just, as I know what it's like, I have had this experience. I've lived in places like this, and I think, oh, it's going to be great. In a few days, I get to go back. Or, why am I here for all these years? I'm going to leave, and I'm going to do what? I'm going to just cooperate in this machine, which is the supreme ruler. Because the way that we've put it, it's as if there's this elite group of politicians and elite group of business people and this elite group of priests who are running the world. But that isn't actually true. The system has selected that those groups exist. There are elite groups of such people, yes. But the system has selected the people who are most subservient to it to fill those positions. Those people who have most totally given their power over to this machine are the ones who have risen to those ranks within it. The people who seem to have the most power are the ones who have the least power. Exactly the people who seem to be the leaders of the world are the ones who have the least leadership in the world. Because they have as much as they can, given themselves over to the system and serve it. And so it rewards them with power. In the same way that I reward my car with being able to drive around. It has no power. It might look as if the car is the thing that's driving around. That's not what's happening. These people are just tools of a system that has no soul. It's just a system that is growing. That system is based on our minds, our bodies. And I'm suggesting that there is something that is free of the trappings of your mind and your body. And the word for that that I'm using in this talk is friendship. Our ability to walk this path, our ability to fulfill our vow, is simply our ability to be a true friend. A friend as deeply as possible, meaning we can see a person for who they truly are and respond to that, and maybe disagree with them, but not leave them. It means that we're a friend to as many living things as possible. We're a friend to all the beings in the world. This requires a different experience of the body, so that finally the body becomes our tool, rather than our lives just being a tool of the feelings of our bodies. This is how most of us are. We just get pushed, they just push our buttons. And I want to be clear, this machine is not waiting. It's learning better and better how to push your buttons. It's better at it now than it has ever been before. You can't wait. You can't say, it's going to be fine, I'll just take a break and join that system for a little longer, and then it'll be fine someday for some reason. Every day we're part of it. We help it along, and we give our lives over to it more. And the trappings of the human mind, this is what we're living by. There's something beyond that, and we can call it friendship if we want. But we need to have a different mind to live according to friendship, this mysterious something. We need to have a different body in order to live according to friendship. We need to have a different mind and a different body in order to live according to friendship. And beyond that, our job is to take this friendship. It's not an easy task. To take this friendship and find a way that is able to rise up through complexity so that it remains the basis of our civilization in the way that it has been in the past. That is very hard. The way we have done it until now is that we gave up on that and we turned shared beliefs. It turned out that we could collaborate in large numbers with shared beliefs, with shared worldviews, shared perspectives. That worked well. And that kind of collaboration was both more powerful than this direct connection of friendship, and also far more evil. Because it's inherently delusional. It's inherently delusional. To live in an imaginary world is inherently delusional. I don't know how else to say this. If you're living in an imaginary world shared with everyone else, you're delusional. You're living delusionally. It's just how it is. So the very thing that provides us as a species with power is exactly the same thing that makes us delusional. That's why we're making the horrifying mistakes. Nobody wants to destroy life on Earth. But we're just delusional, and so we do what we think is the right thing. Get a job. Right? And then the Earth is destroyed. How did that happen? This is how it happened. You're delusional. Your power is your delusion. Our job is to take this true friendship and find ways that is the thing that rises up through the systems, through complexity, to large and large numbers of people, so that we're capable of collaborating through this true love. The significance of this path is that this path is what allows us to do that. And it's hard. I'm not claiming it's easy, but that is what we're doing. If we can do that, well then, we're leaders. That's leadership. That is actual leadership. It's a leadership that ends not merely with human beings being friends with each other, but through the complete destruction of the division between human beings and nature. because that is already delusional. The complete end of the distinction between self and other, between us and them, between inside and outside. That is friendship. That's friendship beyond what our minds and bodies can understand or want. We have the chance here to directly experience this and then to set ourselves to work in discovering how that can be the basis of this little community, and then of a network of communities, and then of the larger society, and then of the world. Because the system that's running the world now is not waiting for us to figure this out before it finds new ways to trigger us and control us. For us to be awakened leaders doesn't mean that we wait. For us to be awakened leaders means that we step forward right now. We discover what is friendship truly. What is that truly? It is not just agreeing with each other. It is not that. It is not merely sharing beliefs, sharing perspectives. It's finding the thing that binds us together beyond mind and body, beyond what we feel and what we think, beyond our convictions, beyond our understanding. Let this be the basis of our vow, the basis of our lives. Let us explore this deeply. Let us walk together as true friends.